Our God, we come humbly before the mighty throne. We thank you for this opportunity. We as a family could come and worship you and encourage one another with you. We ask the Lord, please be with us in this hour. As we're going to fellowship, as we're going to hear your words. Give us the understanding of your word, that we may understand where we are and how important it is that to prepare ourselves and understand what's happening around us. Oh Lord, we commit this time into thy hands. We ask you, Lord, please be with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. My presentation today, I'm reviewing Elder Tess's presentation on that she did in May 30th, 2020. Her presentation was, the heading of the presentation was from Relfe to Veith, and also about the Ramsey theory. Basically, what my presentation will be around is getting us to understand how the Protestant mindset, the Protestant mindset, where their belief system, their worldview, and also the methodology that they use in order to come to certain conclusions or interpretation on events, or especially the prophetic understanding of the Bible. And this is basically what my presentation will focus on, especially in the time that we are living in, and how we need to understand the Protestant mindset. Because we're going to go on with our study today, we're going to see that the Protestant mindset is exactly, I'm just giving you an overview, just said exactly the same, in principle, the same mindset that Protestant, that Seventh-day Adventism have also. And this is exactly what Elder Tess and Elder Puminda has been trying to emphasize to us with, that we need to understand that if we follow or have the Adventist mindset, we're just similar to the way the Protestant think. And this is exactly the overview of how my presentation will go, and hopefully we'll be able to do it. Otherwise, then it will be done in 2 sessions. And one of the method, or one thing that Protestantism always use in order to get their ideology or their thought out is by using conspiracy theories. This is exactly what the overview, what I'm going to share with us, and I hope that it will help us understand why the elders are emphasizing towards us, how important it is that we use our parable methodology, and how we have nothing to gain from the other Adventist theology or teachings. That we should always, especially in this time, focus on the presentations that our elders are presenting. As you see on the board, I place, I've seen our general line, the line of 144,000. And you've noticed that I've highlighted the 1979, which we here in Fiji, we know Vespers on Friday, that Irini has been presenting to us about the moral majority. I'll just put the moral majority here. And we understand that this is one of the reasons why we shift, as Elder Kes has presented, it was one of the reasons why we shift from the right to the left, from the right to the left. 1989, why I had drawn this is just to show us where we are in history, where are we in the line, and where are we to focus on. And in this line, we see that we've passed 2021, we passed 9/11, we are about to approach our Sunday Wema. And this shows us where are we to focus in our presentations, what are we to look at and more and try and understand, because what we are about to approach. And hopefully that this presentation will give us a fair idea just to help us to understand how Protestantism think, their mindset, and also the methodology they use in order to come to certain conclusions. But before we go there, I would like to share screen and read to you a quotation. A quotation that is written in Great Controversy 457, paragraph 2. Great Controversy 457, paragraph 2. Can everyone see the board, the share screen? Okay. I will read this. The history of ancient Israel is a striking illustration of the past experience of the Adventist body. God led his people in the Advent movement, even as he led the children of Israel from Egypt. So if we will notice here, what Ellen G. White does is she compares ancient Israel with the Advent movement, and how she showed what happened there and how they were brought out from Egypt, and how the Advent movement also brought out from the Protestantism. So you will see she continue writing as you move down. We will notice how she compares and contrasts what happened in ancient Israel with modern Israel, the Advent movement. So I will take us back where at the beginning of ancient Israel, and I'll lay down some histories, and then we will compare that and contrast it with modern Israel, right? As she had described in her quotations. So I just put 400 years here. We understand that they were in captivity in Israel for 400 years. And this was the period of darkness, okay? They came out of Egypt. I just put Egypt, okay? Then they were in darkness, and they were in captivity. And also, as you see, they lost, the Sabbath. They lost the understanding or the keeping of the Sabbath. So these are some things that happened within the captivity of Egypt within the 400 years. And God had a deliverer, right? So I'll note here, a deliverer. I just put Moses as their deliverer, okay? Moses as their deliverer, to deliver them or bring them out of this Egyptian captivity. And when he brought them out, what God did, he gave them the Sabbath. Okay, this is just a review. He gave them the Sabbath, okay, to them again, was restored back to them or retaught back to them. And also, they had, and he rose as a prophet, yeah? And that prophet was Moses. Okay, that was going to guide them or lead them through their history, yeah? Throughout their history. Then the next waymark we could see is Babylon. Okay, they were taken, everything that God gave them here and the instruction that He gave. We saw that one thing we understood that happened when they came out was that they made, as we know in the study about the epistle, and they continued worshiping idols. The epistle is just a mindset that they brought from Egypt. Eh? We need to keep that in mind. And this is the reason why they went into captivity into Babylon, because of those. Now, in Babylon, and then we understand that this is the line, I just put across here, this is the line of Christ at the end, or this is where Rome, okay, was leading them. Now, after the captivity, if we go back into the reviewing the study of the epistle, we see that after captivity in Babylon, they were cured from idolatry. But in the form, the literal keeping or worshiping of idols, they did not do that anymore. But then we understand that there was the spirit, which is the mindset. They held on to it as they went into the history of Christ. And one thing that we saw, that what Christ did when He came, they were expecting, from after Babylon, they were expecting Christ to come as a king, a literal king. Okay, so one thing we'll notice that what they did, they took literal king, and they were expecting Him to come as a literal king. Okay, as they were studying. So the literal methodology they were using. But when Christ came, Christ did not come as they expected. Okay, He did not come as a king. Didn't come as a king. And what they did, and they went against Him. Not only that, Christ tried to teach them through parables. He taught them, or tried to teach the Jews through parables, which we understand is literal to spiritual application. Literal to spiritual. This was something that really made it hard for the Jewish people at that time to accept Christ as the Messiah, literally, and also the teachings that Christ was trying to teach them through parables. Matter of fact, they took Christ, and we understand in this history they crucified Christ. They didn't accept Christ as their Savior, as their Messiah. When we bring this down into our history, okay, this is the Omega of ancient, the Alpha, this is the Omega of ancient Israel. Okay, I'll just put IS. And this is modern Israel. Okay, this is the Alpha history. We understand this is Miller. I'm just trying to give an illustration. So they were in captivity for 60 years. Okay, they were in darkness. And also another thing, they lost, the Sabbath was lost in this time. Okay? God raised up a man, a deliverer that brought the Advent movement out of Protestantism, and that man we know is Miller. So I'll just put Miller here as the deliverer. And also, if we see here, he reintroduced, after he brought them out, separated them, he introduced the Sabbath, and also a prophet was raised, which we know was Ellen G. White. Okay. Then the Babylon history is lined with the 1888 history. And then we have 144,000 lining up with this. As we see, after the Babylonian captivity, one thing that they held on to, that ancient Israel held on to, was the Sabbath. Okay, and they kept the Sabbath, not only the Sabbath, but the laws, especially those sacrificial laws and everything that thing. And they thought that that would that made them a special people. So if we study in history and we line up with 1888, we also see that the SDA or Seventh-day Adventism also held the same mindset as the Jewish people had, and they held on to the Sabbath. And they think that this Sabbath will make them a special people. Until our line, when we come to our line, the Jewish nation here was upholding the Sabbath. Okay, as what Christ did, broke the Sabbath, and they started going against Christ because of what he did. So likewise, and Christ's teaching was contrary to their teachings or what they thought. So likewise, as we come to our movement, I'll just put us, our movement, our movement began to introduce the parable methodology, just as Christ did, taking literal into spiritual. Okay. So as Christ was fought against, was ridiculed, same thing we will expect here in our time as we see in the history. So this is just an illustration of how, as Ellen G. White stated, the history of ancient Israel, and it's a striking illustration of the past experience of the Advent movement. Okay, so this is how we can see it as we put it through line upon line. And one thing that we need to understand, that the literal interpretation or expectation, and how the Jewish nation expected Christ to come as a literal king. Same thing as we see here, that the problem that Adventism also does is they have little expectation. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take us back into history, and we're going to go through in history, we're going to go through the mindset of how this literal interpretation is the interpretation of the kind of methodology that Protestantism used way back into this history, and what they used in order to come to these conclusions, and the methodology they use in order to come to these conclusions. So I hope that we understand that you've got this, and how history is repeating, and how God is using the lines in order to explain what's happening to us in this day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this off. So what we've done here is that we've done ancient Israel history, and we've compared it with modern Israel history. So what we've done is that we've taken the literal, interpreting the spiritual. This is the methodology that we use in this. Also, another methodology that we can use in this context is what we call the Alpha and the Omega. The Alpha and the Omega. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the Omega of modern Israel, okay, the history of Omega of modern Israel. Okay, this is the Omega, and the Alpha, the Alpha history of modern Israel, which is the history of the Millerite. Okay, I just put Miller, and compare that with our history, which is the Omega. This is the 144,000. And there are some interesting things that I would want to share with us. And for me, as I was reviewing this, I found it very interesting because for me personally, when I was a Sunday keeper before I came into Adventism, and as I entered Adventism, I was firstly exposed to the independent mindsets, where later on we will study that there's a lot of conspiracy theories that they use in order to, come into certain conclusions. But before that, I will take us through history. So this is the Omega. Right. So this is 1798. This is 1989. Okay. So what I will do, I will take us back here. We'll go back a little bit, and we're going to see the historical thing and what led the Protestantism. Our focus here is about Protestantism and the mindset and they had and how their mindset or the way they interpret their interpretation of Bible prophecy and how it also begin to influence the political aspect of the American government. So I will take us to 1798. And one thing we understand that there was a state waiting for the end. This is Waiting for the End. This is a book that is written by William Martin. And he issued this book in around 1882, in the year 1882. And this book, which is the heading of this book, is Waiting for the End. And this is the growing interest in the apostolic prophecies, how the Protestant churches, how they begin to focus on Daniel and Revelation, and how they begin to interpret Daniel and Revelation, and we will understand when we do this, how their understanding and interpretation using their own methodology, how they came up, and how we will understand why the moral majority with Jerry Falwell and all those very famous ministers at that time, evangelical ministers, how they came up to those ideas or theology or their beliefs, and they try and push it into the government because of their interpretation of the prophetic, especially the books of Daniel and Revelation. Okay, so I'll just read. Just bear with me. I will read some of these quotes that is brought from this book of William Martin's in around 1882, which was published, and the heading is called "Waiting for the End." And it says, "The world as we know it is coming to an end, not because some general or madman will push a button and reduce our planet to poisonous ash, and not because the weight of burgeoning population will cause it to launch out of orbit." Sorry, yes, thank you for that. 1982. Okay, this is within the moral majority. So this is 1979. Okay, this is in the time period of the moral majority. This book was published. So we would understand that whatever this person is writing, it's telling us of the mindset of the way or what the Protestantism is thinking, or the interpretation of what are they expecting to happen in the near future. And it says, Rather, the end is near because God has had it planned that way for at least 1,900 years. It's all right there in the Bible, in Daniel and Revelation. Okay, so you will see now they're saying that the end is near because of the book of Daniel and Revelation, because of the interpretation of the book of Daniel and Revelation. Now, the Judeo-Christian history has seen numerous outcropping of interest in biblical prophecy, usually in times of social upheaval, but few, if any, have been as widespread and influential as that now flourishing in conservative Protestant circles. No hard data are available, but millions of American evangelicals apparently believe that within the present generation, this generation, okay, and probably sometime in the 1880s, Jesus will return to lay the groundwork for glorious 1,000 years reign here on the earth. So what they're expecting is that the millennium will begin. So this is something that they're expecting for it to happen. Okay, so they begin to interpret Daniel and Revelation according to their own methodology, the methodology they use, this book, and and they begin to interpret it, and they're expecting Christ to come. Now, some of the famous ministers, the same themes are proclaimed by such leading television evangelists as Oral Roberts, Jerry Falwell, our famous Jerry Falwell, Pat Robinson, Rex Humbert, Herbert W. Armstrong, Kenneth Copeland, and Jack Van Imtis, and such lesser known programs as the Voice of Prophecy. Okay, so you will see this is in this time period we're speaking about. So these people are beginning to, these evangelical ministers are beginning to teach or present that Christ is coming because of their interpretation of the Bible prophecy. Yeah? Now, see what William, the author, begins to do. He says, they have been the subject of novel states, plays, films, and cantatas, and reflected in the hymns, gospel songs, and bumper stickers. Ready or not, Jesus is coming. Okay, so they begin to promote these thoughts. Okay, the #1 notification volume in 1970 was not the Revolutionary Diet Plan or Manual on Sexual Fulfillment, but Hal Lindsey, which we will do a little bit more, The Late Great Planet Earth. Okay, one of the 5 successful prophecy books by Lindsey, and led the New York Times to name him the best-selling author of the decade. The book was also the bias of 1977 movie narrated by Orson Welles. Okay, look at what he begins to do. Though its growth has occurred mostly within the past 2 decades, just talking about this history, okay, this movement based on biblical prophecy had its roots in the 19th century. Okay, so the movement, this movement, the moral majority, what this author is saying is that it had its roots, okay, in the 19th century. So what he did, he took us back, okay, he takes us back into this history. So the roots of their beliefs, or what, the interpretation of Daniel and Revelation and what happened here, he's trying to say that their roots, the roots of what they believe here, was already been developed around in this time period in the 19th century. So it takes us back into our history of 1798, in the early 19th centuries. Okay, see what he begins to do. The French Revolution and its aftermath have kindled interest in prophecy as biblical students saw the destruction of the papal power. So what began to make Protestantism, just a question to ask, what begins to make Protestantism begin to study Daniel and Revelation? Can anyone share from what I just read? In this history, he took us back here. What caused them to begin to study the book or the prophecies in Daniel and Revelation?
Was that the French Revolution? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the French Revolution. And also it spoke about the French Revolution and the fall of the papal power. I can put it this way, just to summarize all of them. It is the external events. Okay? It's the external events that has caused the Protestantism to begin to search the prophecies in Daniel and Revelation. Okay, so one thing that we'll understand that it is in this time period, in the Omega of ancient Israel, of modern Israel, sorry, it was the same thing that also led the Protestantism in this time period to begin to search the book of Daniel and Revelation and begin to come to these conclusions. It's also the external events. Yeah? I'll put the external events. Okay, I will continue with the external events this year. This says, the French Revolution and its aftermath had kindled interest in prophecy. As a biblical student saw the destruction of the papal power, the secularization of the state, the rise of the religion of reason as being remarkably similar to events described in Daniel and Revelations. So they begin to see the external events and they begin to say, oh, this is similar to Daniel and Revelation, and they begin to give their own interpretation on what Daniel and Revelation is meant. So the point that I'm trying to emphasize here is that the external events cause the Protestantism to begin to study the books of Daniel and Revelation. Okay. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go into this history. Okay, just to show us how it's connected. It's connected with this. In this history, you will begin to see, as we have understood, the I think I've forgotten, am I right or not? What Afghan war, is it the Afghan war or is it the Syrian war? In this time period, is one of the external events that caused the Protestantism to begin to search or study Daniel and Revelation. Also, the restoration of the Jewish nation, especially Israel, and how the restoration of Israel begins to give them the understanding, because they were taking little Israel as the little glorious land that is spoken in Daniel. So they were expecting the restoration of Jerusalem to be done. I will continue reading. And what he begins to do, he begins to show how external events begin to allow many Protestantism to study the books of Daniel and Revelation. And what William says, the most notable millennium during the first half of century, however, was William Miller. And he mentioned William Miller, a prolific writer who held camp meetings and tent revivals that built him a following estimate at 50,000 people. Miller believed so strongly in his ability to interpret biblical signs that he confidently selected 1843 as the year Christ would return. Okay? So he begins to explain about William Miller. I will continue reading some of this. Just bear with me. Though the factions with the ranks of the realist fundamentalist degree over the precise sequence of events, those who adhere to Darby Scofield's version believe that the triggering action will be the rapture. Right? This is their beliefs, what they think. I'm taking us back into this history. This term, not found in the Bible, means the catching up. After the rapture, let's look at what they begin to the interpretation of what the Bible is trying to tell, prophecy is trying to say, and this is their belief, their mindset. It says, after the rapture, a 7-year period of tribulation will fall on those left behind. It will begin with the appearance of the Antichrist as leader of a 10-nation confederation. So look at what I just write down what they said. They're expecting an Antichrist, okay? And what this Antichrist will do, he will be a leader of a 10-nation. Okay, this is the mindset of Protestantism, or what they believe. 10-nation confederacy. Okay, so we understand that they're expecting, this is the understanding and what the expectation, that there will be an Antichrist, and this Antichrist will be the leader. Okay, this Antichrist will be the leader of the 10-nation confederacy. Okay, and then he will seem to be a man of peace and will side with Israel. Okay, so now Israel comes into mind. This is literal Israel. So they're expecting some of these things to happen in literal Israel, which is we know as Israel now. When it is threatened by a northern coalition with is now generally expected to be led by Russia and to include Germany, the Arabs, and Iran. His help will not be needed, however, because the coalition will be so devastated by earthquakes and pestilence that it will make 7 months just to bury the corpse. Realization that the rapture saints, the faithful who were caught up, had been prudent to believe in Jesus will cause 144,000 Jews and a multitude of Gentiles. So what they're interpreting is that the 144,000, this is their mindset, are Jews. Okay. This is the kind of interpretation that they are put into the books of Daniel and Revelation in this time period. Okay, the time period of the moral majority. Why is this so interesting? Is that we're going to see, okay, in 2016 when Trump came into power, you will see one is they try and move the capital city from of Israel. You know what Trump was pushing for. You will see that this is the mindset of Protestantism or the moral majority in this time period. Okay, so what we're seeing happening now is something that has been already developed way back here. And I know that we've gone through those studies on the moral majority. Now, see what he says. A multitude of Gentiles to accept him as a savior and Messiah, which is the Antichrist. This converts together with 2 outstanding prophets, possibly Moses and Elijah brought back to life, will win others to Christ. Okay, so that's their interpretation of what the book of Daniel and Revelation is and what they're expecting to happen next. Okay, now unfortunately, these new Christians will be marked by persecution by the Antichrist, who by this time will have begun to show his true colors. In a symbolic act, so that it will be known as the abomination of desolation. The Antichrist will enter the temple of Jerusalem, literal Jerusalem, okay? He's going to go into Jerusalem. The Antichrist is going to go to literal Jerusalem. Remember, the interpretation here is they take it literal to literal. As we discussed earlier. Okay, they're going to literal Jerusalem, the temple in literal Jerusalem, cancel all worship services and begin to use it as a political headquarters. In fear for their lives, many will seek refuge in the rock cliffs of the ancient city of Petra in Jordan. During the tribulation, look at how they're going to begin to see. During the tribulation, the earth, this is after the rapture and everything, the earth and its people will be visited by unprecedented inconvenience, rising sea levels, 100-pound hailstorm, falling stars, fires, devastated with 1/3 of the earth. It says, the Antichrist will seek total control over humanity by requiring that every person wear a mark or a number. Okay, so what they believe is that the Antichrist is going to begin to will seek total control, and then everyone will need to have the mark. Okay? We'll have to have the mark or the number of the Antichrist. Okay, or the number. It's probably be the number 666. Yeah? Okay, that he's going to get everyone, all humanity, to receive this. Design mark, or which is called the mark of the beast, in Revelation 13, 16, and 18. In order to buy and sell. So you will have to receive in order to buy and sell. So I'll remind us again, why am I doing this? And I'm taking time to emphasize this. This is the mindset or how the Protestantism are interpreting Bible prophecy to be like. Okay? And what we're going to do is that we're going to take this mindset and then we're going to compare it with the mindset of Adventism now. Remember, this interpretation is done in 1982, okay? Around this time where the moral majority is in it, is running. Those who refuse to accept this mark of the beast will be slain or will reach starvation because they cannot buy food. Those who accept it will burn forever in hell. At about this point, okay, at about this point, he's talking about the Antichrist when it begins to rule. At about this point, when there's persecution, when there's a mark of the beast, it says, the Antichrist will be joined by the false prophet. So they believe in a false prophet also. I'll just put the word false prophet. False prophet. Okay. A religious leader associated with Babylon, a city called the mother of harlots, and often identified in prophetic as the Pope. So in other sense, what they're saying is that the false prophet is the Pope. That's what they are interpreting, that the false prophet is the Pope. Now, at this, Christ will return in glory, touching down in the Mount of Olives and be held by every human eye, probably by means of satellite television. He will join the Battle of Armageddon, and his arms, perhaps comprising of raptured saints, will wrap such destruction that blood will flow as deep as horse bridle with distance of 200 miles. Now, I hope that you understand the interpretation of the book of Daniel and Revelation that Protestantism had in this time period. And this is exactly how they interpret the book of Daniel and Revelation, that there will be an Antichrist, okay, who is a political leader or a leader of a nation. There will be a 10-nation confederacy, and it will be led by this Antichrist. And also they're expecting the restoration of Jerusalem, okay, and how Jerusalem needs to be restored. And also they interpreted that the 144,000 will be Jews, and these 144,000 Jews who are in Jerusalem, who are in Israel, will be the ones that will be evangelizing the world to change, with the help of the two prophets, which they expect to be Elijah and Moses. And also you will see that the Antichrist will begin to try and get people to get their mark or the number, or which is called the mark of the beast, which is the 666, which people won't be able to buy and sell. And they're expecting the false prophet, which to them is the Pope, in this time period, within this time. So this is some of the things that they had in mind. The interpretation of the book, how they interpret the book of Daniel and Revelation. It's interesting for me personally, as I entered Adventism way back when I started. It's interesting that these are the same things that SDA also believes. Not exactly the same as, they believe as literal Jerusalem is going to be restored. Adventism also believe, if I have to mark, they believe in the Antichrist also. Adventism does that. Adventism also believe that there will be a 10-nation confederacy, okay, and that it will be led by someone, okay. Something that we are not together with them is this literal restoration. This is not something that we are different from. But we are also expecting this, a mark of the beast or the number, which people will be able to buy and sell. Okay, it's similar. We also, as Adventists, not we, but the Adventism also had a interpretation that there will be a false prophet. Okay, from what I get from Adventist independent ministers, which I came out of when I came into Adventism. One interpretation they gave in Adventism that it's this false prophet is the United States of America. So apart from this, you will see that the mindset or the interpretation that Adventism have, the 10-nation confederacy and etc., and how they begin to interpret the book of Daniel and Revelation, Adventism, you will see it's almost similar to the mindset that Protestantism have. This is exactly why Elder Tess has been emphasizing, if we begin to use, and Elder Paminda, we begin to use the methodology, or we begin to listen to the interpretation of Bible prophecy of the Adventism, then this is what's going to cause us to remain in the condition of Laodicea. And this is very important that you and I understand. This mindset of Adventism, we notice that it is similar to the mindset that Protestantism have. And then their interpretation of Bible prophecy. And it's very interesting that you and I, if we look at this, we will see that we are no different. Adventism is no different from Protestantism. And for me personally, as I reviewed this and as I studied, I realized why our elders has been emphasizing to us the importance of using our parable methodology, in order to understand Bible prophecy, and not the Adventism methodology that they use. So I just took us through history, getting Alpha of modern Israel and comparing it with Alpha of Omega Israel, and we see how they use the Protestantism, use the external events in order to interpret, begin to have interest in studying the book of Daniel and Revelation, similar in this time period with the moral majority. And this is exactly what thing, and they came up with this rapture and all this ideology that they have towards this interpretation of the book of Daniel and Revelation. So we see no difference in this to the interpretation of the book of Daniel Rose. It's almost similar. This is the only thing that makes us make Adventism. Sorry for using the word "us," not us, it's the movement, but it's Adventism. What makes Adventism different is just through certain areas or certain interpretation of certain things in the book of the Revelation, about Daniel and Revelation. But otherwise, you'll see majority of the interpretation that Protestantism have using literal interpretation. We also have that. Now, I will take us back into the history. I want to take us way back to the history in the Millerite history. Yeah? So I hope that you've got this. And what we're going to do now is that we're going to go back into the history and we're going to look at an external event in the election in the 1800s. Okay, we're going to go back into the election of the 1800s, the election of between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson in the 1800s. So what I will do with the remaining time that I have is going to take us back, and what we're going to do is that we're going to see how the religious or the Protestantism had an influence into the political realm or political side of things. Yeah? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take us back into history, into the 1800s, and we're going to just address a little bit about the history of 1800s and how the election and the influence of the Protestantism within this 1800s election and what happened there. Okay. We'll take us back into the 1800s. Yeah? This is the election between, I'll just put Adams, John Adams, who belongs to the Federalist Party, and Jefferson. And Jefferson. One thing that we need to understand in this time period, and Adams was supported by Hamilton. We know, which is also Alexander Hamilton, which also is a Federalist also, and he supports Adam. And in this history, Adam lost the election to Jefferson, and the reason why he lost to Adam in this election was because of the Alien and Sedition Act that Adams passed while he was a president before this time. This was a disadvantage towards him, which caused his downfall also, which caused him to lose to Jefferson in the election. And Jefferson's belonged to the Democrat Party at this time. Yeah. But behind Adams is a famous, also I can say, Protestant minister, who is called Jedediah Morse. Yeah? Jedediah Morse. Jedediah Morse. Yeah? And one thing we're going to do just before this, we understand that when Protestantism, I'll put something like it. What happened is that Protestantism begins to split, which they call the second great awakening. The second great awakening around this time period, before 1798. Now, Jedediah Moss, what he begins to understand with the prophetic thing is that he begins to believe, or begins to interpret, or begins to preach, around this time period about the Illuminatis and how the Illuminatis is controlling the United States of America. So these thoughts of the Illuminati, or this teaching of the Illuminati, Jedediah Moss is also teaching and sharing about, and then trying to take Jefferson and say that he is Illuminati. This is what he says. Jedediah Moss disclosed details of a dark conspiracy involving both domestic critics of the Adams administration and a mysterious order of the European anarchists known as the Bavarian Illuminati. By framing his suspicion in the form of Jeremiah, Moss evoked a rhetorical context which portrayed the conspiracy as a divine test of American civic piety. As a result, the conspiracy provided a rhetorical justification for the condemnation of domestic political dissent on moral grounds. You know, what Jedediah Moss begins and came to a conclusion that America has been run by the Illuminati, or he mentioned the word deep state. He mentioned the word the deep state, deep satanic state. What Jedediah Moss begins to believe, that America has been led by a deep satanic state. What he begins to do is that, look at how he came into this conclusion and begins to share it. What he did, he went back into the French Revolution. Just give you a fair idea of how he came to this conclusion. He went back into the French Revolution, and one thing that he shared was that the French Revolution was caused by this Illuminati, this deep satanic state. And with that conclusion, he also brought it into this election. And one thing that he did is that he begins to share that Jefferson and Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, they're both into the secret society. Okay, this is where the thought of the secret society, deep satanic state, this deep satanic state, I can put it into another word. This is where the word secret society. Okay, these secret societies. These secret societies are running the government of the United States of America. This is exactly what he's saying in this time period. And he came to a conclusion that Jefferson is Illuminati, and also Hamilton is also Illuminati. The reason of him saying that, or they saying that, is because the home base of the Illuminati, whether the headquarters, I can say the home base of the Illuminati is in the state where Jefferson comes from, and also in the state where Hamilton comes from, the same state as Jefferson. So what he begins to do is that he begins to bring where Jefferson comes from, okay, and where Jefferson comes from is the home base of the Illuminatis, and then he brings Jefferson and say he comes from this same place where the home base of the Illuminati is, and also Hamilton, okay, also comes from here. Because what happened was that when Adams fell, Jefferson and Burr, who was also a Democrat, they were the split in votes, split between them. And what happened was that Hamilton begins to, after Adams lost, who was supporting Adams, when Adams lost, what Hamilton began to do, he begins to support. Look at how they came to this conclusion that it's a secret society. How they begin to put, I can put this equation, 1 + 1 gives you the answer. So what they begin to do is this. What Hamilton began to do after, I'll just put Hamilton. Hamilton, who is a Federalist, who supported Adams, after Adams lost, there was a split in the electoral vote between Jefferson and Burr, equal. They had equal things, so there was no confirmation who's going to be the president. So what happened was Hamilton begins to support Jefferson, which helped Jefferson, which caused him to go against Burr, and what Burr did, Burr got Hamilton killed. So the conclusion that came up was because Hamilton supported Jefferson, okay, and they both come from the same state, okay, and the state they come from is the home base of the Illuminati. What they begin to do, they begin to interpret, okay, that maybe, could it be that both of these two belong to a deep satanic state or a secret society? So, and this is something that Jedediah Moss, who is one of a famous minister, a Protestant minister in this time period, came into a conclusion that the United States government is being run by a secret society. And this is something that he begins to share and begins to say that this deep society states is run in the United States of America. This is way back in 1800s. Yeah? It's interesting for me. It's interesting that we Adventism also believe this. Yeah? It's very interesting that Adventism also believes in that there's the Illuminati, the Freemason. We believe Adventism also believe that the secret handshakes, the hand signals, the way the president sits, and etc. I was brought up to this, and shows that all these secret societies, all these leaders around the world, because of their handshake, their signals, belong to a secret society, and they are trying to get the world together, okay, and begin to do their agenda of being a globalist. And this is something, whatever Adventism has, one thing I'm trying to emphasize here is, one thing that we see that Adventism does, and all the interpretation and how they are using, this sharing about the interpretation of Bible prophecy through secret societies, through pictures and etc. This is something that is well established within Protestantism. This is trying to show us that the mindset of Protestantism is similar, or the mindset of Adventism is similar to the mindset that Protestantism has. There's no difference. And this is why we cannot, for us who are in this mood, we cannot waste our time or trying to go into these Adventist ministers to interpret the Bible for us. It's because of time has caught up with us. I will summarize my presentation for us this today. You know, one thing that Jedediah Moss believed was the literal reading of the scriptures. And it's interesting that in this time period, I'll just share some historical background. In this time period, Protestantism split into two factions, into two groups. The group which is also the Northern Protestants and the Southern Protestants. Okay, it's split into two because of the interpretations, how they begin to interpret the Bibles, and it split Protestantism into two. And one of the famous president whom we know, which is Henry Clay, around 1844, he stated something. What he stated was that the greatest danger, okay, look at what this president says, the greatest danger was the split within Protestantism over the issue of slavery. So what happened is that Protestantism split, okay, into two factions. And this split was based upon slavery, as we know is the context. One says, no, we're not supposed to have slavery. The other says we have to because it's biblical. Okay? So the South believed that the literal close reading of the scriptures, that scripture supports slavery or segregation. Okay, so that's what the South believes. The I'm talking about Protestantism. And the literal to literal reading, okay, as I said, the literal to literal reading of scriptures. And this is exactly what Jedediah Moss begins to use. Now, this split within Protestantism that happened around this history, interestingly, it caused, Henry Clay also says that it caused also later in history in around 1860s, at least 1861, also caused a split in the political. Okay, I'll say this is protest, okay? This is the political. Okay, into North and South. South supporting slavery, North is going against the slavery. Why I got this out is just to get us to understand how Protestantism, okay, this shows us how Protestantism has a great influence in the politics of the United States of America. Because this is what Henry Clay states, just because there's a split in Protestantism between North and South here, which also resulted in the split of the two political, the main political parties at that time, the split between the North and the South. And it's also according to the subject of slavery, as we've been studying. So the point that I'm trying to get here is that you'll see how Protestantism has an influence in the politics. And it's a great influence into the political system in the United States. You know, in our time period, around 1989, this ideology of dominion theology, or the ideology, which we will, if we're going to see it in detail, it's similar to the mindset of the Protestantism around this time period. What dominion theology says is that we need to understand the law used in the Bible. Right? This is what dominion theology, which is in the time period of 1989, the moral majority. They believe, what they believe is that the law, or the United States Constitution, the law needs to be interpreted or understood using the Bible. The Bible needs to be interpreted, yeah. And then we'll see how that affects and the push of Protestantism within the American government to make America a Christian nation, and also the laws needs to include their dogmas or their teachings. Yeah? So, just to review, you'll see how the Protestantism mindset, how it is completely, it is the same as Adventism mindset. Okay, there's nothing new. We also went through history and saw how the method that Jedediah Moss used, how he begins to get Jefferson where he comes from and Hamilton where he comes from, and came to a conclusion that there's a deep satanic state. Okay, that there's a secret society, which many of independent Adventism also believe that the governments have been run by the Freemason and the Illuminati, so etc. Beliefs. And how we see Protestantism is having an influence into the political split here into North and South because of the subject of slavery. Here, there's a split also in the political realm between North and South based upon slavery. And so, and one thing that Jedediah Moss also believed was that the reason why, because of not keeping or having Christ, or that we can say the Bible, into the laws or the government, okay? Political side. There's nothing new, as we see that SDA mindset is similar to the Protestant mindset. With my next presentation, going to go through the methodology or the method that they use, which we can compare it to the method that most Adventists use. And one very famous one person also was this lady called, who is also a minister in the time period of the time of the moral majority, which is called Mary Relfe. Mary, let me get her name. Relfe, okay? And the methodology that Relfe used was that she uses slides. She uses slides to show her point. And her point was that there's a deep satanic society because of the number 666. She begins to get pictures of the logo of a company from England, company from Japan, from other nations, and they begin to bring them together using slides, and then begin to see this. You see here the barcode. They have 666, and this one has 666. This one has 666. So could it be that they have this is a secret society run by a secret society? They are all in the same company, and that's the method that she used in order to interpret or to Mary Stewart Relfe. Thank you so much, Mary Stewart Relfe, in order to come to conclusion that the one world order or a secret society is running the world, which Protestantism in this time is against globalism. This one world government that people are trying to do. And she came, using slides, she came into conclusion that there's a deep society, deep satanic state that's running the world. And it's interesting that our famous minister, which is Walter Veith, he uses the same methodology that Relfe used, using slides and pictures in order to interpret Bible prophecy. With the presentation, I hope that God brought some clarification on the mindset of Protestantism and their worldview, the Protestant worldview, their belief system. I hope that you understood that, and through history and what happened and how they came into these conclusions, and we see how it is similar to the Adventist mindset also now, and the methodology that Protestantism, Adventism is using is similar to the methodology that Protestantism is using. And this is the reason why we should not use those methodology, but use our parable methodology. In the next, because there's in the next presentation, I will speak more on conspiracy theories and how conspiracy theories, what Jedediah Morse did here. He formed a theory. He made a conspiracy theory using certain patterns, and this is what we're going to study by God's grace in the next presentation on conspiracy theories, the Ramsey theory, and the methodology that is used in order to come into these theories, and how these conspiracy theories or these methodology and the conspiracy theories, how it's going to the dangers that it has for us. I will look through the scientific side of it, how conspiracy theories affects society and also the school societies. So I hope that by God's grace that I can enlighten us a little bit more on the study and on how the mindset of Protestantism is similar to the mindset that Adventism had at this very moment. And the interpretation of Bible prophecies, though they are different, the interpretations, the conclusions are different, but the principles are the same. They come to the same principles, the same ideas, ideology. Adventism is no different from Protestantism at this point. And as we know in the Sunday law, they are both heading off to shipwreck. Okay? And if we still hold on to these conspiracy theories, this methodology of understanding Bible prophecy, what's going to do, we're going to also shipwreck. This is what's going to keep us in the leadership condition. This methodology that Adventism is using, which is similar to the methodology that Protestantism. With those things, I hope that we have a blessed Sabbath, and I would like us to bow our heads close with the word of God. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for this opportunity that we could come and sit and study your word, the histories, make us understand it, oh God, that the mindset, Protestantism, the mindset that Adventism has a similar, and we have nothing to go to within Adventism, Lord, to get an interpretation of you. We thank you so much for the methodology that you've given us, the parable methodology, and understanding you. And we thank you so much for your messengers, oh God, that be able to show us and open up our eyes to see the reality, to interpret your word correctly using the parable methodology. I ask, Lord, that you will be with us, continue to help us, to establish us in the messages, and that we may focus more on the event that is ahead of us, that we still have the mindset of the far right, Lord. Help us to get out of it and come into the side that you want us, which is the left side, Lord. And we ask you, Lord, to be with us, continue to bless each and every individual who's listening to your word, who's listening to your message this day. We continue to be with them, guide us, and help us, Lord, that we may be established into the present truth, the midnight cry message. Thank you for answering our prayers. In Jesus' name we pray.